Hello, my name is JD, also known as JD Beauty. On this channel we talk about all things beauty, and today we are returning to the series that I started last week called Glam Gore, where I tell you about my favorite horror movies while doing my makeup. Before we get into what I'm talking about, I do have 2 new subscribers, but I can only see one of you. So thank you so much to Andrea Hudgens Miles. Shout out to you. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to everyone else who has been either subscribing or just liking or just watching, just in general. Even if you're not subscribing and sticking around, you're still helping my channel out. So thank you. It is 11:43 at night on a Thursday, which, by the way, I guess these videos are just coming out on Friday now because the whole record on Wednesday, post on Thursday routine has just not been working. But without further ado, let's get into what we're actually here for, which is the horror movie itself. And today we will be talking about Halloween 1978, the original, with, of course, the horror icon Michael Myers. You may not know this about me. I love Michael Myers. That's my favorite slasher in history. But without further ado, I'm going to get into both my makeup and the movie. And of course, that means I have to take my glasses off, which of course means that I cannot see my script, which means that if between cuts you see me start to lean this way, it's because I'm looking at my script and I have to lean in because I zoomed in and I still can't see it. I can't see a single word. You know how most movies start off and it's like they start off with a scene first and then we have ourselves a nice little title card? Yeah, not Halloween. Halloween wants to get straight into the credits. We start off with one of the absolute best theme songs in horror history. Top 2 for sure is Halloween and Saw, and I can't tell you which one is number 1, which one's number 2. It switches all the time. But that it's simple, it's just a piano, but it's everything to me and I'm obsessed with it. I have it saved in my Spotify playlist and I listen to it just regularly. Anyway, we start off with the song and then we get into our credits. We also get a pretty quick title card. Like I said, a lot of movies want you to experience a scene first and then they're like, title card. But nope, not Halloween. Credits, title card, and then movie. After the credits are finished, we see a screen that just says Haddonfield, Illinois. And I sure hope that I do not get that constantly confused with Hackensack, New Jersey. The screen then says Halloween night 1963. We then follow a POV shot. We don't see who this individual is, but we do see everything that this character sees. We see as they approach a house and they go to look through a window and we see 2 inconspicuous teens making out on a couch. And if it's one thing that you will ever learn from a slasher or a horror movie in general, slashers do not like romance or any type of sexual tension. They don't like it. Don't do it. If you think that you're in a horror situation, they covered this in Scream. If you think that you're in a horror situation, don't go to that bedroom. There is a teenage girl and a teenage boy who you assume must be her boyfriend. They're making out on the couch. The guy says, "Are we alone?" And the girl says that someone named Michael is around. We don't know who Michael is, but he's around. The boyfriend shows off a clown mask, then discards it, and they go back to making out for a little bit. After a moment, they decide to head upstairs together, and that's, you know, like I said, that's your first mistake. You're in a horror movie, don't go up there. But they go back upstairs, and the figure who we are following goes back around to the front of the house and watches as a bedroom light, who we assume must be the girl's, is shut off. With that done, we follow the figure's POV shot as it goes around to the back of the house where a back door is just wide open. The figure walks into the kitchen, grabs a kitchen knife, makes its way towards the stairs. But it doesn't quite go upstairs yet because very quickly, the boy's making his way back down the stairs. He's putting his shirt back on. I can only assume that they did something in 2 minutes, tops. He also name drops her, and we now understand this girl's name is Judith. The boy leaves, and Judith, the girl, makes her way back to her room as the figure makes its way up the stairs. The figure stops in the doorway of Judith's room, grabs that clown mask that we saw earlier and puts it on. It then goes into the room and we see Judith at her vanity, much like I'm at mine, except she is topless and she is brushing her hair. And if there's anything that you should also know about a slasher is that slashers hate when girls are shirtless. Judith then turns around and she sees this figure. She calls out for the figure, referring to it as Michael. Michael proceeds to stab the girl, Judith, like 100 times. Judith falls to the ground, dead, presumably. And Michael makes his way back downstairs, makes his way out of the house, and finally it switches from a POV shot and we see a little boy in a clown costume. He takes his mask off and he's holding the knife in his hand, bloody, obviously. We see a car pull up and who we can only assume are his parents gets out of the car and they just kind of stand around him looking mildly confused. You see your little boy outside of the house, completely stone face, blank eyes, staring off into the distance with a bloody knife in his hand, and you're not like That's concerning. Anyway, the screen fades to black again, and we are now given a new location, which is Smiths Grove, Illinois, and we are now on October 30th, 1978. We are inside of a car as a man and woman drive together. The woman is driving, the man is in the passenger seat. We see that the woman, at least, is a nurse based on her attire. And we're not entirely sure what the man is quite yet, but you can guess based on conversation that he is a doctor. The nurse complains about the inmates and how they rant and rave and they don't actually make any sense. And the doctor's like, oh, you don't have to worry about this one because he hasn't spoken in 15 years. The nurse asks the doctor what should she give the inmate once it is taken in front of the judge. The doctor responds, Thorazine? That seems like it makes more sense. The nurse is like, he'll barely be able to sit up, let alone do anything else. And the doctor's like, yeah, that's the idea. Trust. I know what I'm talking about. The nurse says to the doctor, you're serious, aren't you? Like, you really never want this inmate to get out? And the doctor's like, yeah, never. We pull up to the location and we see a shot of inmates just roaming around outside. And the nurse is like, they just let them roam around outside? And the doctor's like, hey, pull up to the gate real quick. So she pulls up to the gate, he gets out, and he goes to just like inspect things. I don't actually know what he's doing at the gate, he's just looking. And while he's looking in a general direction of gate, we see a inmate climb up on top of the car. And no one seems concerned about this. The doctor doesn't turn and see any of this because he's too busy looking at the gate or something in the general direction of the gate. Still not entirely sure what he's doing, but I know that it involves gate. The inmate climbs on top of the car, and the nurse is like, oh, that's weird. And then she, for some reason, rolls the window down, and obviously the inmate sticks his hand down and into the window and just like grabs her face. She puts her foot on the gas and drives away, but it seems like she only drives like a couple of feet, but I don't really know. Her foot falls onto the gas and she moves the car in somewhere. You would think that she would just move it towards the doctor into the gate, but no, maybe she swerved it. I don't know. Either way, the car swerves off and then she stops again, I guess. She then moves into the passenger seat and I guess she thinks she's fine over there, but no, we then see the inmate's hand just sliding down, and then there's a very hard cut to the hand smashing the glass. It's not one take, obviously. The nurse gets out and she's like in the grass on the ground in the rain, just like, oh my god, the inmate, it touched me. Anyway, as the nurse gets out, the inmate gets into the car and then drives off. Knowing that we know who this inmate is, how do you know how to drive? You were arrested or taken away when you were like 6. What was that about? The doctor runs up and he's like trying to run after the car. Where were you when the inmate was on top of the car? He runs after the car for like 2 seconds and he's like, ugh, he's gone. He's like right there, but I mean, you can't chase him down, penguin. So the doctor runs off to do something, I suppose. And then we see the screen say Haddonfield again, present day. For them, Halloween Day. Back in Haddonfield on Halloween Day, we see a young lady leaving her house, and soon after her, a man who I assume is her father walks out and says, don't forget to drop the key off at the Myers place. She promises that she'll leave the key, and then he said, just put it under the mat. They walk through the neighborhood following this girl, or this young lady, and she meets up with a little boy who refers to her as Lori, and she refers to him as Tommy. Lori is our main character, and since she's our main character, that also means that she is our final girl. Tommy asks Lori if she'll be coming over later, and she's like, yeah, same time, same place. So we can assume that Lori is this child's babysitter slash nanny, babysitter, whatever. They continue to walk together, they talk until they reach the Myers place, which is vacant and for sale. She goes up to drop the key off, she drops it off, she turns around, and of course, as she turns around, out of sight to her, but in frame for us, a figure steps out from the darkness of inside the home. Tommy runs off, leaving Lori to walk off on her own, and then the figure walks out of the house and watches her walk off. The scene then switches to a man talking to the doctor from earlier. I'm not entirely sure who this man is, but it doesn't matter. The doctor's like, trust me, this one needs to be found pronto. The scene then switches to a classroom where we see Lori in the back of her classroom sitting next to a window, and she's writing in her little notebook or whatever, homework, school, work. Haven't been in school in a long time. And as she's writing, she looks out of the window and she sees a figure standing outside behind his car, but just like staring directly at her. She's looking at him and then she looks away and she looks back and then it's gone. And it's like, you move that car super fast. The scene then switches to a group of little boys and they are following another little boy who is, I didn't realize originally, but he was for sure Tommy. And he was carrying a pumpkin. These little boys are bullying Tommy as he's carrying his pumpkin. Tommy tries to leave, but he gets tripped by one of the bullies and he falls on top of his pumpkin and squishes it. One of the kids runs off after this and he gets stopped by Michael, who literally grabs him, and they just stare at each other for a second, and the kid's like, and runs off again. We then see Michael following Tommy. Michael gets back into his stolen car, which he is just like an expert at driving for some reason, and he proceeds to continue following Tommy, and he also drives like extremely slow next to him, and Tommy doesn't react or notice or anything. And this is the first point in the movie where I realized that these characters have horrible spatial awareness. At no point do they notice that this man is following them. And it's not like he's subtle, he's giant. He's a giant man. The scene switches to the doctor, still unnamed at this point, by the way, as he speaks in a phone booth to an unnamed officer, and he keeps insisting that he, that's my quotations, he is on the way back to Haddonfield. And the doctor's like, trust me, I know that he's on the way back here. I know him because I was his doctor. Dun dun dun. I don't know what it is, but you Leos drive me crazy. Wonder why Tyrese is stuck in my head today. I hope it has nothing to do with TikTok making a certain sound by him go extremely viral. My Shayla. Back to the doctor. He walks off, and then he just like sees a tow truck, and he's like, something about this tow truck is suspicious. And then he walks in, he grabs some fabric, which I didn't get at first, but was the inmate's original like inmate clothing. The doctor's like, oh gosh darn it, no, and he runs off. But then as he runs off, unseen to him but seen by us because we are the camera and we see what they don't see, we pan over and we see a body hidden in a bush. The scene then switches back to this high school as Lori and her friend, who is introduced as Linda, as they're walking, a third girl named Annie joins them and is like, hey, what the heck, why'd you guys leave me? They continue to walk, and then Lori pauses and like, gosh darn it, I left my chemistry book back at school. And the girls are like, okay, and? I leave my chemistry book all the time, on purpose. We hear the iconic piano theme playing again as a car rounds the corner and makes its way towards them, and it's driving very slowly, which is obviously very suspicious to a group of 3 girls. One thing about Michael Myers, he does not like girls. Michael's driving past them, staring dead at them. As he drives off, I think Annie or Linda, I think it was Annie though, like yells out something about speed. Speed kills, I think. And then Michael just slams on the brake and just sits there. And Lori's like, you're gonna get us killed one day, bro. He drives off and they start walking off again. Linda breaks off from the group first. She goes home, and then Lori and Annie continue to walk together. Annie's just like, I think looking in her purse or whatever, her little bag, as Lori looks up and sees the most iconic scene, which is Michael standing behind, like barely behind a hedge and staring at Lori. And it's hilarious because it's like, it is the absolute funniest scene I've ever seen in my life. Lori is the only one who sees Michael because she is the only one in this group with spatial awareness. And by the time she's like, Annie, look. Annie looks up, Michael's gone. Annie goes to the hedge to look, he's not there, and she messes with Lori a little bit like, oh, he has a crush on you, he wants to see you. Lori comes over and is like, I swear he was there. And he breaks off to go home as well, and then that leaves Lori to walk home on her own right after she just told her that she saw a strange man staring at her from behind. Lori finally arrives at home. She goes inside, drops her belongings off. She goes to her window, which she notices is open. She goes to the window. She looks outside, and she gets scared as she notices Michael once again standing completely still outside, just staring up at her window. Now, what gets me in this scene is that Lori is staring right at Michael. She never looks away. Now we, the camera, we look away because the camera's looking at Lori, and then it switches to outside to look at Michael, and then it looks back at Lori, and then it switches back to Michael, and Michael's gone. Lori was staring at Michael this entire time. The only people who didn't see Michael move was us. Lori would have for sure seen Michael walk away. So I just like to imagine that it was a scary like disappearance for us, but Lori just watched him like stare at her and then be like, and then walk away. This is the part where Lori finally gets scared enough to slam the window shut and then stumble back. She doesn't have too much time to think about this because as she stumbles back, her phone starts to ring, so she goes to answer it, and no one says anything as she's saying hello, hello, hello. She hangs up, scared, obviously, but then it starts to ring again, so she answers. She's like, what do you want? But it turns out that it was actually just Annie calling. I can't remember why she said she didn't speak the first time. Something about her mom, perhaps, I don't know. But she didn't speak the first time, but now she's speaking. She said something, I didn't write it down in my notes because I'm sure it wasn't that important. It might have been something about the fact that she was babysitting on the same block as Lori so they could go together. The scene then switches to Lori as she walks out of her house with a pumpkin. She's walking out and we see a red car pull up. It's Annie. Lori goes to get in with her. They're smoking. Anyway, the scene then switches back to the doctor, still unnamed, by the way. But he's in the car with another guy, and they're at a They're at a cemetery. The doctor's like, hey, where's the grave that I'm here to see? And the guy's like, oh, right, yeah, come on this way. And then he keeps talking, and then they get to a spot and they see that the headstone is dug up. And the guy's like, ugh, vandals, how dare they? And the doctor's like, so whose grave was this? And the guy goes, like, he's counting all the things, and he's like, oh, this would be Judith Myers. Dun dun dun. And then the doctor's like, he came home. And I know that in his head he's like, yes, I told you he was coming home, and no one believed me, but I was right. Switch back to Lori and Annie as they are smoking in a car, and we see a car following very closely behind them. And this is again where I come back to the spatial awareness of these characters. They do not see this car following extremely closely behind them. It's freaking me out. They're not noticing. They don't notice the car, and instead they pull up in front of this building. They very quickly put their weed out. They pull up in front of this building where the creepy cop from earlier, who isn't actually creepy, I guess, and is actually Annie's dad, they pull up in front of him, and he's like, hey girls, how you doing? And they're like, hey, what's up here? Because the building's alarm is going off. Obviously it was stolen from. The guy's like, oh, it's just some kids. And Annie's like, you always think it's kids. And he's like, yeah, well, it seems like it was kids because only a Halloween mask, some rope, and a knife was taken from here. In that moment, I'm thinking, you said this is a hardware store. Do hardware stores sell knives? Do hardware stores sell knives? My question wasn't answered fast enough for me to actually care to keep going, so we're gonna say no. My notes, however, do say, is a knife a hardware? After getting their answers, the girls pull off just as the doctor pulls up right behind them. He pulls up and he starts talking to the officer father, who I refer to in my notes as Sheriff Cop Guy. This is the first time that the doctor actually says his name as he introduces himself to the sheriff. He's like, Sheriff, my name is Dr. Loomis. Why did it take you this long to... Whatever's fine. He's like, hey, can I talk to you real quick? And the Sheriff Cop's guy like, hey, I'm kind of busy. And Loomis is like, okay, but listen, it's so important, bro, I promise. And Sheriff Cop Guy is like, okay, fine, give me 10 minutes, I'll be back to talk to you. So we just watch Loomis as he waits, and as he's waiting, Michael just like casually drives by Loomis right behind him. Michael catches up to the girls again, and once again he's following very closely behind them, and no one notices as Annie drops Lori off at Tommy's house, and then Michael pulls up right behind the car and just parks right there. No one notices. Annie doesn't notice as she pulls off to go to the house across the street. Lori doesn't notice as she walks off to go to Tommy's door to get let in. No one is noticing that this car is following them. Michael gets out of the car, and he, instead of following Lori, he follows Annie over to the house that she's babysitting in. But we don't actually see any of that yet because we've flashed back to Loomis and Officer Sheriff Cop Father Guy. They pull up in front of the Myers house, which again is abandoned. They enter the abandoned house and they see a dead dog. Loomis is like, he got hungry. Because Michael eats dogs, I guess. It's canon. One thing about Michael, everybody can get it. Woman, man, child, dog, he does not care. And the cop guy is like, maybe it was a skunk. Sheriff Cop Guy is like, no man can do this to a dog. Yes, they would. Men? Man? I know that's like, oh, man's best friend. Humans love dogs so much. Men will do anything to anything. That is not an exaggeration. I really wish it was. As the officer says that, Loomis looks at him and is like, this is no man. Yes, it literally is. No matter how you feel about him, yes, that is just a regular guy. They go up to Judith Myers' old room, and as they're talking, I guess somebody just throws something at or through the window and shatters the window. And that's already crazy enough, but as that happens, Loomis pulls out a gun. He just pulls out a gun next to this cop. The cop does not pull out a gun, by the way. Loomis pulls his gun out, and the officer, Sheriff Cop Guy, does not react to this at all, which is a privilege. Loomis is like, hey, I'll sit here and I'll wait for Michael to come back. And Sheriff Officer Mr. Dad Guy is like, yeah, maybe I should tell the radios so that people know to look out for this guy. And Loomis says no, and the cop guy's like, okay, you're the sheriff. Either way, the sheriff listens for some reason, and he leaves Loomis in this house alone in the murder house where the murder man might return to. The scene switches back to Lori babysitting. Lori is reading King Arthur to Tommy, and Tommy's like, I don't care. Look at my comic collection. Randomly, Tommy asks Lori about the boogeyman, who we've been talking about this whole movie. And before Lori can answer, she gets a phone call, so she goes to answer that instead of answering this child's question. She answers the phone, and it's Annie at the house across the street, to talk while they're both babysitting. As they're talking, the dog starts barking. It is the most cutest little German Shepherd. I love German Shepherds. The dog's barking, which should always be cause for concern. Dogs will bark at anything, but no matter what, if you hear a dog barking, it should set off some type of alarm of like, be aware, you know? Do you think she was aware? No. Back at the house across the street, Tommy walks off while Lori's talking on the phone, and he super aggressively opens these blinds in a way that would still get me beat up by my mother physically right now. My mom has never fought me, but I think that she would if I opened my blinds the way that he opened these blinds. He goes, you hear the sound of these blinds opening. And I'm just like, you didn't break one? These are some industrial grade blinds back in the day. He sees Michael standing outside of the house that Annie's babysitting at. Tommy's like, the boogeyman's outside. And then Lori comes over, looks outside. Obviously Michael has disappeared again or just walked away. At this point, I think he just walked away. And Lori's like, boogeyman doesn't exist, calm down. We see Michael standing outside of the house that Annie is babysitting at. And he is very clearly standing in Annie's line of sight. But she doesn't see him because she's too focused on cleaning. She spills something on herself, so she hangs up the phone with Lori. She calls out to the child she's babysitting and like, Lindsay, bring me a robe. The child, Lindsay, is watching a movie, so she does not hear or pay attention to her. She might have heard her, but she wasn't paying attention. So Annie proceeds to just strip down in this kitchen that is not hers, all the way down to just her underwear. No bra. No one wears a bra in these movies. Hey, me either, bro. She strips down, and then she proceeds to go into this laundry basket, I guess, and take out a shirt that belongs to the man of the house, the father. It's not yours. You shouldn't do that, but oh well. Now, if there's anything that you should know about slashers, again, slashers hate nudity. So this is when you know that Annie has marked herself for death. Michael proceeds to walk away, and he bumps into a houseplant that's hanging out outside the window, alerting Annie of something out there. She's not as concerned as one should usually be upon hearing something right outside of the window. So she just doesn't worry about that at all. It's like, I wouldn't go to check either, but I would be concerned. The dog is now outside and is barking at Michael. And we know that Michael does not care too much for dogs. We hear the dog whimper a couple of times and Lindsay's like, not Lindsay. And he's like, oh, okay, never mind. Handled. Again, she's not concerned about the dog whimpering. She's not concerned about anything. Of course, once we cut back to Michael, we see that he is choking the dog. We're now back at Tommy's house as he and Lori are watching The Thing, which I have never actually seen. Maybe I'll add it to my list. As I'm watching this movie, Tommy is like, I promise you, I swear on everything I love, the boogeyman is outside currently. And Lori's like, I promise you, on everything I love, the boogeyman is not real. And even if he is real, I promise you, locked in like this, pinky promise, I will never let him get to you. Tommy's like, okay, can we make a jack-o'-lantern now? And Lori's like, yes, we can make a jack-o'-lantern now. And they walk off and do that. As the scene changes back to the other house across the street, we're back at Annie now. She walks out to the laundry room, which is apparently separate from the house. I guess it's like a shed with the laundry in it. Whatever. She walks inside. She puts her, I guess, filthy clothes. She spilled I think she said she spilled butter on her shirt, so she stripped down completely and went to go do her laundry. She puts an insane amount of baking soda in this washing machine with only 2 items of clothing in it. That is not yours. Anyway, as Annie is out there doing her laundry, the door of the laundry room slams and locks shut. She decides that she's gonna crawl out through the window. She gets stuck, obviously. Lindsay goes out, helps to get her free. Her heel was stuck, I guess, I don't know. She gets her free, they go back inside. As they go back inside, these people keep on leaving doors wide open in this movie. Michael stands at the back door that she just left open, obviously, and then he just disappears because that's what he does. Annie, after talking to her boyfriend, is like, oh, you want to come over? I'll come get you. And he's like, yeah, for sure. So she just drops Lindsay off with Lori and Tommy and is like, hey, stay here, I'll be right back. She goes to her car. She realizes that her door is locked because why wouldn't it be? And then she's like, oh, okay, let me go back and get my keys. She walks back inside, grabs her keys, and she goes back out to the car. And then she opens the car door and she gets inside. And then as she gets inside, she doesn't realize what I realized. What I realized is that the car door was unlocked now. What she's focused on instead is the fact that the inside of the car is foggy. The windows are all fogged up, which is weird because nobody's inside of this car. He comes out from the backseat and he grips her by the neck and he's just choking her out. I guess choking takes too long because Michael then takes his knife and slits her throat. And there's Annie. She's gone now. Back to Tommy's house. The kids are watching a movie together, and I guess Tommy gets bored of that because he goes to stand behind the curtain to eventually scare Lindsay when she turns around to look for him. But instead, Tommy gets a little curious as he turns his shoulder or turns his head over his shoulder and sees Michael carrying Annie's body back into the house since she was murdered in her car. Tommy screams, which makes Lindsay scream, which makes Lori come in, and Tommy's like, "It's the boogeyman!" And Lori's like, "The boogeyman's not real! If you keep talking about the boogeyman, you're going to sleep!" And Tommy's like, "No one believes me." And Lindsay's like, "Bro, I believe you." "No, you don't. Stop lying, bro." Loomis is lurking around outside of the Myers house. These kids walk up to it. They're like, "Oh, you go up there, you go up there." One of the kids goes up there, and Dr. Loomis, for some reason, decides to say this in the funniest way possible, where he just goes, he doesn't know how to get rid of these kids, so he's like,
Hey, Lonnie, get your ass away from there.
Sheriff cop guy, father man, proceeds to scare Loomis in the same way. He walks up to him, and he walks up behind him and scares him. Loomis is kind of in like a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, because the cop guy is like, well, if nothing happens, then nothing happens. But if something does happen, then damn you for letting him get away. I didn't let him get away. He was in a facility. I was on the way to the facility, and he had already escaped. What was I supposed to do? Linda shows back up. She's in the car with her boyfriend or whatever. They're making out. They're making this plan to sneak into Lindsay's house, the girl that Annie is babysitting, was supposed to be babysitting. Like, we're gonna sneak in and we're gonna go inside. We're gonna go up these stairs. We're gonna go to the first bedroom on the left. And they're just gonna... In there? That's not true. That's not even your house. It's not even Annie's house. You guys are disgusting. Disgusting creatures. The two go inside of Lindsay's house, and they're calling out for Annie. Annie's for sure not going to answer for reasons that are obvious to us. And they give up on that endeavor pretty quickly. They're like, oh, well, she's not answering. Oh, well, let's go make out on the couch. And as we all know, Michael hates PDA just as much as he hates nudity, affection, sexual attraction, and women being shirtless. He hates all of these things. He stands around the corner and watches these people make out. And, you know, he's standing there menacingly as he figures out what he's going to do to them. Lori and the kids finish their jack-o'-lantern across the street, and Lori, I guess, looks outside and sees that Linda, who I referred to in my notes as girl number 3, because again, by this point of the movie, I could not remember her name for nothing. She looks outside and sees that her car is there. Lori calls Linda, and Linda's like, hey, I'm here. Annie's not. And Lori's like, oh, that's weird. Well, she did say she was going to go pick up her boyfriend, so maybe they did a little detour or whatever. Linda and her boyfriend, who I think is named Bob, they go upstairs and they get into this bed that is not theirs. And they create a dance house music video horizontally. And it lasts for like all of 2 seconds. Now listen, I hate sex scenes, so I was glad that it was over quickly, but I don't think she was. They smoke in this bedroom that does not belong to them. And then Linda, who again I referred to as girl number 3 in my notes, is like, I want a beer. And the guy's like, okay, fine. As we all know, Michael Myers hates beer. He's more of a wine guy, red wine to be particular. So as this guy goes to grab a beer, he hears the door creaking open, and thinking that Linda or Annie are playing a joke on him, he's looking around. But as he's looking around, Michael grabs him around the neck, chokes him up against the wall, picks him up, and in the most iconic kill in history, he takes his knife, stabs it into him, and he leaves him hanging up on this wall like a piece of art. He steps back to take a look at his work of art, and he does the Michael Myers head tilt. He's just looking at it like, I did good. Anyway, after that we then switch back to Linda, who is laying in bed, and she looks up to see who she thinks is her boyfriend Robert, standing in the doorway, but it's actually Michael who is standing there with a sheet over his body with a pair of sunglasses over the sheet where his eyes would be. And for some reason, this is not suspicious at all to Linda. She's like, oh, hey, did you get my beer? Michael, of course, doesn't answer. She's like, oh, don't you want to get in the bed? Michael doesn't answer. She pulls her sheet down and shows off her breasts. And we all know Michael does not believe in freeing the nipple. Michael hates female toplessness. So you already know. She's marked, bro. She's marked. Again, still not being too weirded out by who she thinks is her boyfriend, his silence. She gets out of the bed pretty casually as she hears the phone ringing, so she goes to answer that. And just as she picks up, Michael comes up behind her and proceeds to choke her out with the phone cord. Because phones used to have cords back in the day. Did you know that? She's getting choked out, and all Lori hears is her moaning from the other side of the phone. And I thought that she would think like, oh, she's calling me while creating a house music dance video, but no, she's just like, oh, stop playing pranks on me or whatever. I don't know. Linda dies very anticlimactically, and then Michael puts the phone to his ear to hear Lori, and I guess just breathes menacingly in response, and then Lori hangs up. Meanwhile, we were flashing back to Loomis, who was still standing outside the Myers house. For the first time, I guess, since he's been here, he turns around and sees the car that Michael stole just across the street. So you're telling me you were across the street this entire time from the car that you were riding in this car. Where's the nurse? We go back to Lori, and she goes downstairs, and she's like, I'm gonna go check on Linda. Crosses the street, she approaches the house. She calls out for Linda, she gets no response, obviously. She goes around the back of the house and sees this back door that's been open for this entire sequence of events. But Lori goes inside, and she finally closes this door that's been open this whole time. And then she goes in to find her friends. She finds them for sure. But what she finds is Annie's body laid out in this bed with Judith Myers' headstone above her. She, in fear, backs up into this closet. The door is open or falls open or whatever, I don't know. It's open now. And boyfriend Bobby's body just like swings down from the ceiling. I don't know how he got up there. And she stumbles back again. She stumbles into this like cabinet. The door swings open. And then she looks over and she sees that Linda's body's in there. Everyone's dead. All her friends and his boyfriend guy are dead. Lori screams and she runs off to cry in the hallway. And then Michael just like steps out of the darkness and just like slices her arm. After slicing her arm, Lori just like, and she like falls over the railing somehow, falls down on the stairs, and she's just kind of laying there. And then Michael starts slowly walking downstairs, so she's like, gotta go. She goes to the door, tries to open it. Somehow Michael has locked every door from outside, but he is inside, so I don't know how he got inside, but all the doors are locked and he is inside now. So she goes into the kitchen, she shuts the door to make sure that he can't get in, locks it. She goes to go open the back door. This is the back door that she just entered through is locked now from the outside. It has like a rake leaning up against it. Michael, how did you get in here? 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 As Michael starts to break the door down, Lori just like, she's like, forget it. Psh, smacks the window. She smashes it, she gets out, she escapes. She then runs back to Tommy's house and she's knocking on the door, and Tommy and Lindsay were asleep. So as she's knocking the door, Tommy's like, oh my God, who is it? And she's like frantic, just in pure fear as Michael slowly walks across the street towards her. That's what's even scary. He's not running at you, he's slowly approaching you. So she's knocking on the door. She's like, Tommy, let me in! Tommy, let me in! Tommy's slowly making his way down the stairs, and he's like, I mean, obviously, he's a kid, and he's tired, and he doesn't understand that, like, it's drastic. But you hear the way that she's screaming, oh, get to the door faster! He unlocks the door. He's like, what's up? She runs in, closes the door behind her, locks it. Lori tries to call the police, but the lines won't work, the phones won't work. I don't know. And as she's sitting there, she notices that the window is open. Scary. Noticing that the window is open, I think she goes to sit on the couch, or she's near the couch. Michael badly misses as he tries to stab her, stabs the couch instead. Lori grabs a sewing needle, stabs him in the neck. Michael falls. Bow. He's dead. Lori grabs Michael's knife and then just drops it right there next to the couch. She goes to find the kids and she's like, everything's okay. Everything's fine. The boogeyman's not real. He won't hurt you. And as she's saying that, of course, the boogeyman is making his way up the stairs. Lori's like, oh my God, no! She locks the kids away, then runs into this room, and she opens the balcony door to make it seem like she might have run and jumped out or whatever. But after she opens the balcony door, she then goes to hide in the closet. Michael does not fall for it at all. Little trick she's trying to play, he doesn't fall for it. So he starts to like bang on the closet door, and she's screaming. He's banging on the door, and you can see as he's banging on it that the door is like, it's a frail door, and he's a strong man. He could have broken this if he wanted to. Anyway, he stabs through the door. As he starts to get inside, Lori grabs a wire hanger. No more wire hangers, ever! She takes the wire hanger, straightens it out, and then once he gets through, she kapow! Jabs him in the eye. Michael does not appreciate this very much, but it doesn't matter because Lori managed to grab his knife in this whole debacle. I didn't actually see her grab the knife, but she has the knife now, I guess. And then she stabs him for real. Bow, he's stabbed now. He falls to the ground. Lori then exits the closet. She goes to get the kids and she's like, listen, go across the street to Mackenzie's house and tell her parents, call the police now. They go screaming and running out of the house. As they're screaming, Loomis sees them and is like, Michael's probably that way, huh? As Lori is crying in the doorway, and we see Michael, like the Undertaker, just rise up into a seated position, and he looks at Lori. Lori and Michael stand from the ground at the same time. Lori does not notice this man at all. Michael very slowly approaches Lori, and then grabs her neck from behind to choke her out. In a frantic attempt to get away, Laurie pulls Michael's mask off, and if you know anything about Michael, he does not like having his mask off. By the way, I didn't notice that in the scene. Maybe I've just been watching really bad copies of this movie. I didn't notice that you can see his face when he takes the mask off. When she takes the mask off, I don't like it. She takes the mask off, and Michael's like, "Oh shoot," puts it back on. And for once, Loomis is finally useful. He comes in, guns a-blazing. He sees Michael. Bow! He shoots him like maybe 10 times, and he falls over the balcony onto the ground. Loomis has finally done something for this entire movie. He has saved Laurie's life. The movie comes to an end as Loomis peers over the balcony down at Michael's body, which is no longer there. The boogeyman lives on, and Laurie knows this when Loomis looks back at her, and she just starts to cry. Roll credits. With the end of the movie comes my final thoughts on this movie, which is that it is my absolute favorite movie. I love Halloween. I want to go back to Hot Topic and get more Michael Myers shirts. I have this one that my dad gave me for Halloween, and then I have one that I got from Hot Topic. I almost got a hoodie from there, but their hoodies are expensive, and I was like, I didn't have a job at that time. If you have somehow managed to go all this time without watching Halloween, any of them, let alone the original, let me know what you thought about this. If you have any movies that you would want me to go over someday, let me know. I'll eventually get to your requests once I get through the ones that I want to talk about. If you like this video, make sure to leave a like, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe. Tell me what some of your favorite movies are. If you want to support me in any other ways, you can look at my description, not my bio, I got it this time. I have my Cashapp in there. If you ever want to just send me a couple dollars, you know, just a suggestion. Or, you know, Instagram if you just want to see me. I try to post on there. I always forget, but I'm trying my hardest. Hopefully you guys are seeing this video on Friday. If not, I really tried my hardest. It's a lot to do in one day when I have to work and then record and then edit. Doesn't matter. Anyway, we're at the end of the video now. I do not have an outro. I never do have an outro. I probably never will have an outro. At this point, not having an outro is my outro. However,